Hello, 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 and welcome to the Coaxum Report. My name is Terry Coaxum, and I am happy to be joined today by Kari Edwards. Kari Edwards is a community builder. He's doing some super amazing things, and I'm just so happy to have him on. Kari?
Hey, thank you for having me. I feel honored and privileged.
It is truly a pleasure to have you on today. I see one of your old jobs with Air Wellness. You're no longer there with them, but I see that the banner says showing that. But he's a community builder. He's no longer with AYR Wellness, but he's doing so many other amazing things. So, Carly, I'd like to really get on the show to talk about barriers, best practices, and big ideas. Before I get started, I just want you to let our listening audience know who you are. For those of you that are just jumping in, you can join us on Android, on Apple TV, you can join us on Roku, WSTX Bloomberg, and on Saturday, you can join us again on Tempo. So, hopefully, you're listening in. I encourage you to download the Connect app or OurTV.network. So, Carly, tell us a little bit about who you are, how you get in this space, and then we're going to jump right into, some barriers, best practices, and big ideas.
Yeah, well, I fell into this place by accident. Grew up in a very advocate heavy household. My mother was someone who believed in civil service and in people service, and so she was the reason that I got into this world of politics and giving back. She's been my inspiration in that place. But I was born in Brooklyn Jewish Hospital. I think it's condos now. A lot of years ago. And a little known fact that people don't know is that I was diagnosed with diabetes at 4 years old.
Sure. Wow.
I was in a coma for 3 months. When I came out of that coma, my mother forever called me her miracle child, but always told me that the life I was given, I needed to pay that forward. So my entire life has really been about trying to connect people, build with people, support people, and somehow, some way I fell into the world of politics, government, and all in between.
Absolutely. So, first of all, I'm so disclosure. So, Carrie and I've worked together for so many, many years. Carrie's worked in government, community advocacy, healthcare, you name it. He's always been very strong in making sure that he's connecting to resources, connecting individuals to resources, communities to resources, organizations to resources. And so it's truly a pleasure to have you on today to talk about some of that. And I knew your mother very well. I call her mom. She's a very strong advocate for a lot of us along the way. And so in addition to nurturing you, she nurtured the community as well and made sure that we had access to contracts, access to opportunities, and more importantly, she told us when we were right, she told us when we were wrong, and she loved us along the way. And so I just want to personally thank you for sharing your mom with us. And I want to talk to you a little bit now about some of the barriers. I mean, there's a lot of different roles you play, but as community builder, you stand in a gap for many, many people. And I want to talk a little bit about some of those barriers that you faced along the way to really try to move our community along, especially here in the County of Kings.
Yeah, I mean, such a deep question, right? Because, folks don't realize the work that you and I've done, just how difficult it is building that bridge, right? And so people will reach out to us and say, hey, look, I need this, I need that. But they don't really see the background in building those relationships, building up your credibility, building your trust. And like I said, luckily enough for me, my mom was kind of the footprint. So folks was like, okay, you Eleanor's son, so I gotta trust you. But the one thing that she always said to me was like, if you're in a space, your name is everything. And I joke and I tell a lot of the students that I work with now, I went from my first job with Nick Perry in 1999. I had about 20, contacts in my phone, mostly friends, that I'm up to 8,000 contacts in my phone. And the reality of it is that you have to keep your word. Even if you can't do it, you need to say you can't do it. If you're going to try to do it, try your best to do it. And I think that then creates that place for folks to feel that, okay, I could trust you. And so a lot of the jobs I ended up in was based on.
So now, it's funny that you said that, because as soon as you talked about your word being your bond, so to speak, right, I thought about Marty Markowitz, right? I remember Tracy Boylan and Anna Robinson and Al Van back in the day working for the DA's office, being at the table, right? And I remember Marty Markowitz said something that stuck in my head I'll never forget. He said, the people you help may remember, the people you don't help will never forget. And that's something that I've lived my life by. And even when it's not my job, I would say, listen, that's not my job, but I'm going to give you access to this person, and I'll make that personal phone call and make that connection. And he was so right about that. The people you help, they were just on to the next thing. You were only as good as your last favor, right? But the people that you were not able to help, they would always remember. But they would always remember us as the person that tried, that connected them to the right person, that told them ahead of time that wasn't our job, but let me see what I can do. And that's what they remembered about you. And that was very, very important, especially in the world of advocacy and connecting, right? Because we're building bridges every single day. But the barriers that I've seen along the way is really been access to capital. For a lot of us, it's access to capital. We can change the world before bedtime, but we don't have the same access as other individuals would, and we're doing more work, right? So it's really interesting, like you're in this space now where you are elevating up another ladder, and it just seems like, I'm happy to see you there, because I know when you're there, when you lift, you climb. So you're not just going to be able to get access for yourself and your community. You can be able to get access for all of those that come behind you. And I think it's very important to understand those barriers. You didn't start on the same footing. Yeah, you had a strong mom who had strong relationships, but you build your relationships along the way. Having 8,000 contacts in your phone is no easy feat, man. That's a big deal. 8,000 people that'll call you back.
That respect, it's a difficult place because you don't know how. And one of the things I told my mom, like, the day I die, I need to ask God, what do Black people do to connect this thing? Because really, for us, that connectivity, that access to resources, we don't share it. We don't do enough with it. And when it's gone, it's like, oh man, every time I've gotten able to open up the door, I made sure to try to open up.
That's right.
Because
a couple of those.
and the thing is, it's like, for me, it's just a matter of being able to say, pay that forward.
That's right. Absolutely. And I think that is one of the biggest lessons. So again, when you're on the show, I ask you to take out your notebooks. We're talking about paying it forward. We're talking about your word being your bond. We're talking about standing in the gap and making sure that our access and resources as community builders is available for all of those that come behind us, those that are in the same line with us, and those that are elevating past that, because we want to make sure that we're opening those doors and a couple of windows for the community. And so I'm so happy to have you talk about that, because these are all the key things that make it possible for us as a people to be elevated. We don't have to wait on people coming in on a white horse to save us from ourselves, right? We know what we want in our spaces, and it's up to us to get what we need. I've been talking to a lot of people about education. They've been feeling a lot of ways about the Department of Education. Federally is closing, and this closing, and that's closing. I said, we've always been behind the eight ball, and we've always come together to make sure our community got what they needed. So we're not worried about what's closing. We're worried about ourselves coming together to make sure that we're able to elevate our children in the way that we need to educate them, right? Because we've always had to work with less and still been able to accomplish such more. I mean, even when I think about things that are barriers like diversity, equity, and inclusion, and we already know we've never had full anything, right? Nothing has ever been given to us. DEI won't mean that we're not qualified. It means that we're overqualified, and we still had to prove it, and we still didn't have access, right? So it gives me pleasure to have folks like you come in the show and talk about, listen, there are barriers in this space, But here I am to show you how to navigate those barriers to get to the very next level. And so keeping your word is your bond. Your network, right? Your network is your net worth. You talked about having 8,000 people in your phone. Again, that's no easy feat. 8,000 people that are returning your call, that's a big deal, right? We talked about the strength of not just your network and your resources, but your mom was in the trenches doing what she needed to do to be able to elevate the community. And in doing so, gave you the strength because you saw a testimony of what it was to get out there and do what we needed to do. And then you took that and you paid it forward. You, your beautiful wife, and your children are doing it every single day to make sure that people have access. And as you elevate to this next level in your life, these barriers are falling by the wayside because you're not letting them hold you back. And I think that is really, really important. So I want to move on and I want to talk a little bit about some of the best practices. So one of the things that when I talk about barriers with my industry leaders, they usually, like I said, they talk about access to capital. They talk about, gender in certain spaces. They talk about background, right? And you've talked about all of those things and still have been able to take it to the next level. So what I want you to talk about now is as you're elevating in your space. Well, first of all, let me back up a little bit. One of the things I always get asked with one is about the educational background and how that network helped you out as well. So I want to back up and talk a little bit about that because in some spaces, individuals that have barriers, they're able to overcome those barriers through the educational spaces that they've been able to move forward in and the networks that they've been able to create as a result of whatever the industry have as far as resources is concerned. So talk to me a little bit about, you say you tripped into the space, but before we get to the tripping part, I want you to talk a little bit about how you prepared, because preparation is everything in these things, especially when we're trying to overcome barriers. How are you able to prepare so that you were ready for next? You didn't have to get ready. You were already ready when the opportunity presented itself. So talk to me a little bit about that before we go into best practices and big ideas.
So I'm an accidental case study. I think part of where am I coming in clear? Because I know
I think, yeah, but it's a little choppy. I don't know why your audio is a little choppy. It comes in clear and then it's a little choppy. Look, technology is great and it works. I tell my students all the time. Much better.
Accidental case study because I've taken a look.
Study. Whoa, doing now.
Well, I'll tell you why. Because I am somebody, and honestly, I think most Black people, we take what we call pain and make it purpose, right? And so
obstacles making them opportunities. Pain making purpose. Okay, I like that. I gotta get my pain for that one. Okay.
And so for me, I fall into this not necessarily because of my mom, but to your point, because of my dad. When I graduated high school, I wanted to be a gym teacher, right? And my dad, being proud Caribbean man, said that I go into occupational therapy and do like the work of either that or become a civil servant. I went to York College and bio and chem at the same time and flunked out, right? Because it wasn't what I wanted to do. It wasn't what I felt I was good at. And then I left and went to national college. And the professor said to me, "Did you ever just take a moment to see what your gifts are?" And I didn't understand what he meant by that. He was just like, "You're somebody who enjoys people, talk a lot. I've had you for a few classes. Maybe being an occupational therapist never was what you were supposed to be." And in flunking out of a school and having to pay my way to the next school and spend 10 years before I even graduated college because I had that pride, I got to enjoy the ability to take philosophy, to take political science, to take English, and started to really hone in on who I was. And then that honing in started me to do a couple of community events. And then Nick Perry reached out to my mother, Assemblyman Nick Perry reached out to my mother and was like, "Hey, I see your son doing all of these events in my district."
Smart man.
He was like, "I want these things for me." And I was like, "Sure." And that's the first way I met Nick Perry, talking to him about my basketball tournaments, talking to him about my enrichment programs, and then all of a sudden he's like, "It's cheaper to hire you,"
That's
and
right.
that's how I fell into politics. Right.
Wow.
Same thing with healthcare. I was working for John Sampson, Senator Sampson, doing all of this intergov stuff for the state Senate. And then John was like, "Yo, I need somebody to look over this healthcare portfolio because Governor Cuomo wanted to close 3 hospitals in Brooklyn."
Right.
And so I fell into this thing. But
Mhm.
because I already kind of understood that people first mentality, or
Mhm.
be honest about certain things, and or how to work through certain things, then all of a sudden I got hired as a vice president of a hospital.
Right.
And ran for office, didn't win, was trying to figure out what my next steps in life were, and someone came to me and was like, "Hey, a cannabis company is looking for a head of corporate and social responsibility." And I was like, "I don't know anything about cannabis. Like, what do I know?" And they were like, "Well, the guy saw what you did while you ran and wanted to create a place for Black and brown people to be part of this."
That's
And
right.
to it, right? And so using that thing about the opportunities, I knew who I was. I knew the foundation of who I wanted to always be. I always wanted to be a servant, right? Not a pastor, not a waiter, but always just a servant in those respects. And those opportunities, or those missed opportunities, put me into that place.
Mhm.
And it's been even where I am now. Like, I was telling you that the cannabis, they let me go in June. So I've been out of work since June, but someone in the DOE said to me, "Hey, you've been doing a lot of stuff for schools, right? I have this thing called What We Do for Schools in Schools." They're like, "Why don't you take your lived experience and get paid for it?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about?"
That's right.
And I became a DOE vendor, and I have one of the biggest civics programs in the DOE right now because of understanding that level of servitude that I knew. And I think a lot of folks, whatever the industry is that you're in, if it doesn't bring you satisfaction, if it doesn't bring you a sense of comfort, then that's not the industry for you.
That's right.
It becomes about money, and all of a sudden you get lost in it. They always say, like, your vocation becomes your love. And just, shout out, I gotta give this quote that Martin Luther King did in his letter from a Birmingham jail. He said, "So many people say yes and do no."
That's right.
Because no was always in them, right?
That's right.
Is what they wanted, what they needed to say. And so I've been blessed to not do things like, I could never sit behind a desk. I could never. I wish I could.
Right. Me either. That's not our reality, right?
And it might be the Virgo in us, right? That might be our thing.
That part.
Um, but there's some people who are great at it. There's some people,
Right.
this is what they do. And I think that you have to really do a deep introspection of who you are, especially if you're at this stage where you're confused or not comfortable where you sit, and then really push that forward. So, like, that's the biggest thing I could say, is that I've always, like, I had a therapist since I was in 8th grade, just because of not anything mental health wise, but it was just, I questioned so much. So
Right.
this is like, I can't answer that question. You need to see somebody, right?
Right.
And those are the things that I knew that I always questioned. And so that's why I knew, going to be an occupational therapist, I was never going to be that person.
That's right. It's really interesting that you did exactly what I needed you to do as far as setting it up, the barriers, right? So there were opportunities to you say your accidental case study, but I want those that are listening to us, and by the way, they're listening to us all over the world. I had an opportunity one day. I was raising money for the Campaign for Hunger, and I'm not going to call one of our friends' name to protect the guilty, right? But he's supposed to write a check, and he went on his vacation in St. Kitts and called me back and was like, "What are you doing on my TV in St. Kitts?" Right? So I say that to say that people are watching us all over the world and looking for that next, right? People are looking for that next. You just gave them a whole walkthrough of everything you've done. I mean, you glossed over it a little bit, But I want to kind of stick a pin in it because, you started out, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to college. I'm going to do this because one of the things, especially, me going to the Virgin Islands, covering the Virgin Islands in Puerto Rico, when I used to talk to my small businesses, they would say to me all the time, their families say, get a real job, right? If I say I'm going to be an entrepreneur, they say, get a real job. And I'm like, I do have a real job. Like this job is making more money for me than any other job. But it's just something about the security of being in government or working for someone else is what my Southern family believes is a real job and what your Caribbean family believes is a real job. But despite that, being a barrier, we stepped out on faith, right? We didn't have to see the whole staircase. You went in that opportunity, but you had a professor that saw in you what you didn't really see in yourself at the time. And they said, listen, maybe you should do this. Maybe you should try that. I had you a couple of times. Here's some of your gifting, right? And so you took your gifting to the next level. Nick was a smart man. He's like, great, this guy's doing some great things in my community. I can use someone like him on board. And so pulled you in, and the love was already there. The talking to people, the resources, the access, seeing your mother in the advocacy role, seeing your dad, it was already there. So then you were able to take it from working for the assembly, working for the Senate, working in healthcare, working in cannabis, and now working in DOE. And so again, you glossed it over, but those are barriers that some people just don't make it through. Some people show up every day, but they're not present, right? So you were able to show up, see what you needed to do and take it to the next level in a way that others that may be listening to us are going to go, wait, Carrie Ellis can do it, so can I. So I don't want to just gloss over those barriers because that's a lot of obstacles that you call accidental case study that you were able to go through to get to the next level. And you did it with your network. You did it with the strength and advocacy of your parents. You did it with your community. You were able to access resources that others couldn't, and you opened up a couple of doors while you were doing it. You stood in the gap and still stand in the gap to individuals that don't even know they need you to stand in a gap for them, right? And now you're in a place where you have the biggest civic program in a DOE, and you're still humble, right? You still are acting like, you grinding and hustling because you still want to make sure that you're giving everybody what they need. And so, I call that die empty, right? And I say it all the time to individuals when they laugh at me. I say, listen, I want to die empty. Everything that God has gifted to me, I want to be able to pour it into others. And you're doing that every single day in every single career move that you're making. And I'm hoping to see you one day in that elected position because I know you're going to be able to take it to the next level there too in that space. And so we've talked about these barriers. We're able to overcome these obstacles. I want to talk to you now about best practices because one of the things that I find either in my students when I teach at Medgar Evers College, when I was at Metropolitan College, or teaching at Bryan and Stratton, that folks get stuck. Right? They look at something, they determine it's too hard before they try. I want you to tell me a little bit about some of the best practices that you're able to use. I know for me, one of them is the Marty thing, right? When Marty said, listen, I need you to understand this, right? So you need to understand that the people you helped will remember you helped, and the people you didn't will never forget. Then I had someone else say to me when I had the unmitigated tenacity to think I was going to run for elected office, say to me, listen, it's not about people, it's not about relationships when you're running for office or in office. It's about interest. The minute someone's interests change, their attitudes may change. And you can't take it personal. You'll never be able to be successful in this role. So those are two nuggets that I was able to take and be able to really push forward to the next level. And the third one is I can't sit on my laurels in the story of the talent, right? So, you get three people, guy gets three people, here you are, right? One of them, I'm going to sit on that. I'm not going to do anything with it because I don't want to lose it. The other one double it, the other one triple it. So the one that didn't do anything with it, he took it away. So I'm always hustling and grinding. You know what I'm saying? I don't want to say I get off against the wheel because I want to be able to move in progress because I don't want those talents that he's already poured into me to be taken away. So talk to me about the best practices. How are you able to sustain through all of this? You just said a big obstacle for people. I haven't worked since June. People are like, whoa, 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 whoa. But you say, and I never miss a meal. And I'm still able to take it to the next level. And I still got 8,000 people on my phone. And you know what I'm saying? So I need people to hear clearly there are some best practices that are able to help you move forward, even if you're doubting yourself, even if you're not where you feel like you're supposed to be. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I'm hoping this is a best practice because it's an internal thing. There's a couple of things, right? Like pride is your biggest enemy.
Mm.
Because part of the reality of, I was telling some students earlier today, because one of the young men was like, hey, I need help. And then one of his boys was like, no, you don't, no, you don't. And I was just like, I'm a man who's very comfortable asking for help.
That's
And
right. That's big. That's
um,
big. Most men don't.
yeah.
Comfortable.
And that literally pride, and if you got to delete this out of our, I'm about to tell you, like nigger pride is a problem. Right? To me, if you're doing nigger pride, you have problems. And for me, the best practice is to understand that the doctor had to pull you out of your mother's womb, right?
Right.
Someone had to feed you. There was nothing that you did on your own, so therefore you shouldn't walk in a place where you should be afraid to ask for help, direction, support.
I know your wife loves you because I remember so many times being in the car with men and they're like, I'm not asking for directions. I'm not asking for help. I'm gonna be, and you're going around in a circle. I'm like, we're lost. But
and don't get me wrong, I sometimes still get lost, right? But then at some point, my clock says, "Okay, brother, enough is enough. Turn around." So for me, that pride can be that negative anchor if we don't use it in the right way. We talk about ego, we talk about those things, and I pride myself on not having that level of I can't ask for help.
big. That's big.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be afraid to ask for help.
Yeah, because it's the one thing that you realize that unless you go through an experience. So sorry, this is school. So the thing about it is unless you go through the experience of it, then sorry about that.
I know. Like that's called life. That's called life right now.
There will be someone. There's always someone who's gone through that, and by leaning in on that and not being that you got to go through it yourself, then you won't make that mistake.
I love that, and I'm going to pause it for a minute because I think it's really, really huge. I get to the point where I tell people we're not on a river in Egypt, so don't be in denial about that, right? So ask for what you need. My mom used to always say, "Closed mouth don't get fed." Right? And so if you're walking around and you're getting mad at me because of the elevation, but you're not asking for what you need, I can only give you what I perceive you need, right? But if you're asking, that's a whole nother level of communication that's going to take you and I both to the next level. So that's huge. Don't want to gloss over it. So don't be so prideful that you don't get what you need. All right? That's the best practice right there. That's best practice. Talk to me.
And literally what your mother said, right? Some people decide they want to go hungry. Like, that makes sense. Let's not do that.
Yes, that makes sense to me. I mean, I like to eat. I mean, you can tell, right? But no, I'm going. There's no need to be hungry over here.
Right. Food is life.
Food is life.
Something else that is a best practice for me. It helped me through my relationship. It helped me be to a parent, and it helped me through a lot of my hard times. Was really about removing expectation of others.
That's huge. Okay.
Because if I expect Terry to do this, and that for me, and Terry only can do this and that, and she doesn't get to the third thing, then all of a sudden now I'm in a place where I'm putting that energy onto her.
Right.
She has a different lived experience. She has other things going on in her life. And so the minute I knew how to move expectations from others, then all of a sudden the world opened up for me. I mean, exponentially opened up, because now as I'm in the places that I am, I put more responsibility on me, my actions, how I follow through, how I make someone else feel.
That's right.
Just understood that, we as people have other things going on. And the funny joke about it was when I was at Brookdale Hospital, there's a patient that came in and was yelling at one of the workers, who's a good friend of mine now, but I mean, yelling at him, cursing him out, wanting to like fight him. And I'm looking at him like, how are you dealing with that? He was just like, I know I didn't do him anything. I know everything that he's bringing in to me has nothing to do with me.
That's right.
removed myself from feeling personal about that situation.
That's right.
Handle how I support him. And I call them the angels along the road, that you see people, you may not know their name, but they come and instill something in you. And that moment that I was able to remove expectation from others gave me so much peace, that was part of my stress, right? My stress was, oh my God, why isn't she doing this? Oh my God, why isn't he doing this? Oh, this is the kind of child I'm gonna raise. Slow down, right? Everybody has their different personalities. We're here to be able to work as a community,
That's right.
what I can handle. And then I started to see things. Like, I started to understand how people move, what I needed to say to them, what I didn't need to say to them, because I started to say that everything wasn't about me.
So you basically met people where they were at.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important for us to do that in all of our relationships, to really remove the expectation. Like, a lot of times people come in already deciding what you should and should not do. But when you do that, you're setting yourself up for failure. And so one of the best practices you just gave is basically removing that expectation and coming in feeling like, I'm going to meet you where you're at. Whatever you're going to do or you cannot do, then I'm responsible for my part as well, and that next whatever it is. And I think it's important, that really is huge, especially in the people work, right? Because there is, again, I talked about it in the first part of our conversation is, you're really as good as your last favor, right? So when you're doing and doing and doing and doing, people are going to expect you to continue to do. And I tell people that piece poor planning cannot be my emergency. You cannot do your part and then drop it in my lap, especially when I'm teaching students, because then I'm going to be stressed, because my expectation is that at some point you're going to come in and help, right? And really you had no intention on helping. That's why you put it there. Right. So if I meet you where you're at, and setting boundaries is really important when you're doing that. Listen, here's what I'm going to be responsible for doing. Here's what you're going to be responsible for doing. Reiterate it. Do you understand? Can you tell me what we just talked about? So that way we both come into this thing understanding we both have a role to play. You're going to play your role, I'm going to play my role. And if one of us falls short, that's okay, because we're only human and life may be lifing. But at least we understand that the expectations are past us. We're only as responsible for ourselves, right? And I tell my children that all the time. You're responsible for your actions, and you're responsible for the response to what someone else did to you. If you come in yelling and screaming, and I'm yelling and screaming, you with that same energy, we're not getting anywhere, right? But if you come in yelling and screaming, and what I'm listening to, and I learned this from Chuck's office, right? I used to work for Chuck Schumer. I'll never forget, anytime there's something education, they pop it on my desk. Anytime there's something seniors, they pop it on my desk. Anytime there's someone gets rental, they'll give me the phone. And I remember having a conversation with someone one day, and he was just going off. And at one point, he stopped to take a breath. And I reiterate, I said, well, what I understand you to be saying is X, Y, and Z. And he paused like he heard me. Yeah, through all of that, I still heard you. And I said, well, here is what I suggest, and here's what I think we should do next. And he's like, it changed the whole conversation, because I met him where he was at. I didn't expect him to do nothing more but to bring it to me. The thing about Sunday press conferences, everyone started checking the Sunday press conference, so they figured there was a magic wand somewhere, right? So they were calling the office with all of these expectations of what we can do, and I had to walk them back down to the city level, or walk them back down to the state level, or whatever it was their issue was. And they were like, oh, well, I just thought he could do, he can't do everything. He can't walk on water. He's not feeding the multitude. You know what I'm saying? Meeting them where they're at and giving them the expectation in a realistic way, and also giving them a task. Because you can't do everything for everybody either, or they're never going to want to do anything for themselves. And so that's a huge thing for us to remember. So we're looking at first understanding, not having expectations, meeting people where they are, right? Now, we have time flying and having fun. We only got a couple of more minutes to get into this, but are there any other best practices before we move to some big ideas? Any other best practices? Those two are great. Any other best practices? So we're talking about pride, and we're talking about expectation. Any others you want to leave?
Yeah, that disappointment is part of the journey. And I learned this. I've been learning it, but I learned it so much more when my mom died, right? Because what the pastor said at a eulogy was that, God didn't promise us life. He didn't promise us jubilee. He didn't promise us all of these things that we look for, and that disappointment is part of life and it's part of the journey. And what you're not supposed to do is sit in it. You have to go through life, um,
Wow.
and realizing that I'm not always going to win, right? I'm not always going to get what I'm supposed to get. But instead of getting mad about it, understand that it's that moment on the road. It's that pebble of that road that you have to go around. And that's helped me out exponentially as well. That I realized that, I have tomorrow. That disappointment is only that part of it. Whether it's disappointing my son and not being able to get to his game, or not being able to close a deal, the reality of it is disappointment is part of the journey that you're not supposed to sit in. You're supposed to go through.
I, I love that, and it's reality, right? Because if you live life, you will have disappointment, right? And so, and the Bible scripture said, "I will never leave or forsake you." It never said you weren't going to go through it.
Right,
He
right.
said, "I will never leave or forsake you." And so, it's important for us, especially when we're sitting in it, to remember, this too shall pass. Because a lot of times we sit in a situation and it just plays itself in our head. I was talking to my oldest daughter the other day, and she was having a moment about her career and some of the changes she wanted to make. And I said, "Okay, what's the plan?" And she was like, "Huh?" I said, "So I understand, I hear you, I hear where you are in your space, but then what's the plan?" And then she walked through with the plan. I said, "Okay." I said, "So go turn on some music and dance around." Tony Robbins used to say, "Jump around and shout out loud, my feet don't stink." Whatever it is, right? To get you out of the mood that you're in right now, because disappointment is a part of life. We are going to feel like we haven't accomplished everything. But if you change your mindset, and I get that from Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich, it is about you changing your mindset and not sitting in that disappointment is going to determine whether you're successful or you continue to fail. So I think that is huge. I mean, you gave three great nuggets to help whoever is listening to us today to be able to take it to the next level. We talked about pride, we talked about expectation, and now you're talking about disappointment is a part of life. I mean, those are three huge things that I know if my listening audience, wrote down their notes like I always encourage them to do, they're going to be able to reflect on this segment and take things to the next level in their life when their life is life in. And so we only got a few more minutes, but I want to talk about big ideas. There's so many things happening in the world. I teach AI and tell my students that AI is not replacing you. It's a tool, just like Google was a tool before. The card catalog was a tool, the encyclopedia was a tool. Those are all tools. It's not changing your mindset. It is actually giving you access to resources that you'll be able to take things to the next level a lot faster. So I teach my small businesses how to work smarter and not harder. Like repetitive tasks, you can get AI to help you do those things, make sure it's safe, make sure it's secure, make sure you're taking out the guardrails and you're looking for hallucinations. That's one of the big ideas that I keep trying to push forward because I need people to understand that we're being left behind. AI is in everything. It's in our phones. It's in this computer. It's in everything. I don't want you to be left behind. I don't want you to be afraid of it. I want you to understand it and figure out how to take out the guardrails and make sure that it's not hallucinating. So big ideas. You're in a great space. You're talking about DOE, big civic program. You're talking about cannabis in a time that, our folks weren't benefiting from that, right? And now that we are, you talked about elected office and how you're going to already given access to so many individuals, and I'm looking forward to what your next is going to be. But tell me a little bit about some big ideas that you want to share with the listening audience.
So I don't know if it's a tangible big idea, but there's a repairing of community that I want to be able to do, and that I think every job that you spoke about that I've gone through is in that respect. And so what I have seen in this particular iteration of it from the DOE standpoint is that I'm able to affect so many more lives by creating interest into people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Terry, when I have, so Meyer 11 was our first school. We have 140 kids out of 530 participated.
Wow.
because they saw someone listening to them. They
That's right.
they saw this relationship to what they've never seen before.
That's right.
And so what my big thing is to be able to take away the impossible,
Hmm.
because I always live by this thing that nothing is impossible. Some things may be improbable, but nothing is impossible. Um, and so for me, the big idea is to really have a community, right? 1,800 DOE schools, probably 900 and change of them are Black and brown under-resourced schools.
Right.
Big idea is to make sure that our kids walk away not necessarily with textbook knowledge, but knowledge of where their lives are. And
That's
so,
right.
however I could do that from elected office, from being a DOE vendor, I want to be able to pump opportunity into so many people.
Hmm.
You can't ignore it, right? And so if your opportunity is to be an entrepreneur, or, we brought a bunch of students up to caucus weekend, and there was a young lady who didn't run for office, but she was the campaign manager of the woman that won mayor. And she's like, I'm the chief of staff.
Hmm.
And then she ran into India.
I'm the kingmaker. No.
Right. And then she ran into India, Jamani Williams' wife. And she was like, I want to get you into Clark College. I want to get you into, and wow. And she's sitting there like, I didn't realize this, but like, these are your opportunities.
That's right.
Learning that when we don't give our children the sky,
That's right.
then they're stuck. So whatever my next thing is, I want that to be an opportunity door opener, because I think once I open the door and somebody else has opened the door, then now we have a whole hallway.
That's right.
So that's my desire.
It's funny when you're saying that. I can see the light bulbs going off in the little heads. Like you're explaining it to me, and I can actually visualize seeing the light bulbs going off in the little heads. And I mean, the desire is possible, and it's possible with all of us. I'm in DOE schools, I'm in Maxwell, I'm in the 760 and 113 and 66. I'm in all of these schools. I do students, I do training for SEL, right? So all of the foster care students in temporary housing, I'm doing the social and emotional training for the providers before they get to in the schools, right? But then I have steel pen, martial artists, cheerleaders, all of these different programs. And what I see is young people and the creativity is on steroids. They are super, super amazing. I have custody of my great nephew right now, and he's 7 years old. And so we developed that he had some learning and learning challenges. They weren't really disabilities. They actually were opportunities for me to write the 504 plan and get his IEP. And now he is excelling. He went in and from June until now, he's 2 reading levels ahead. People are like, how did you do it? Because it wasn't that he couldn't do it. He just learned differently. So you are actually putting light bulbs on, and these little heads, bringing them up to caucus, letting them be in the space with these elected officials and whoever else is in them, because you're not just elected officials, it's industry leaders, it's elected officials, you have lobbyists, you have consultants, you have like individuals from all walk of life, and you're putting in the light bulb, and it's about access. When Kevin Parker told me this story, and I really smiled about it. He said Marty Markowitz came to school and spoke to him as a senator when he was young, and he said, "I'm going to be a senator." And now look who he is, right? That is what we're talking about. We're talking about letting them see past wherever they are in this space. And I think that is extremely important. So I'm on board. Tag me in, coach. I'm ready to help you take it to the next level, because our children are our future, but more importantly, if we give them a trajectory outside of where we are. I never remember when I worked in the DA's office. We had about 150 kids. I remember taking them upstate New York with the Black Cowboys, and they were looking around like, Auntie, where's the concrete? Where's the pavement? I'm like, you're not in concrete jungle. These kids went to college. College wasn't even a thing for them. They were the first to go, right? So I see you lighting up the world in that same way. So I applaud you on your next. I know you're going to do some super amazing things. You're already doing it, right? And then you have your children that are also examples of what you've poured into them, but they're going to be able to help you take it to the next level. Because I can't talk to everybody, but then I tag in my kids so they can get they can reach out, each one teach one. So we're almost out of time. But before we leave, I want you to give your final thoughts to our listening audience, because you've already given us so many nuggets today. We talked about your barriers. We talked about where you've gone as far as your career is concerned, having those opportunities, having those resources, opening up 2 windows and some doors to make sure other people are standing, right? And then we talked about best practices. We talked about pride and expectation, and we also talk about disappointment, right? Not to sit in your disappointment. And when I ask you about big ideas, it's about others. It's about paying it forward for others. It's about lighting up that bulb in the heads of young minds, because you and I both understand once we light that fire, it will never go out. And every single one, whoever they come in contact with, they're going to give them that same flame. And so that's why it's so important. So I want you to leave us with your final thoughts on anything that we discussed today, or just something that you want to bring forth that you've just been kind of sitting around stewing over. You feel like, hey, here's my opportunity to kind of share this moment, because they're listening, and they're ready to take it to the next level. Appreciate your career, appreciate what you've done, appreciate you coming on today and just really sharing the next steps, the various best practices and big ideas. But I want you to leave a final thought with us.
Right. So first I want to thank you for just being a sister to me.
Absolutely.
For so long. And when you spoke about my children, you have really led an example without probably even knowing of how we watched you raise your children, and how you took on your son, and in those realities, as I watched my children, they just saw me. I didn't try to create anything for them. I wasn't going to make them do anything that they want. And so being able to be that example, and that's something that I was able to see in our relationship as friends and family for that long. It's really communication, right?
Yeah.
I think that people do not understand how strong a pathway of just taking a moment to listen changes. Whether you're listening to yourself, listening to someone else, or whether you're listening to just the world. And like I said, I've been forced to have to sit back and listen, but I've learned so much from listening. And so what you're doing today for your listeners and going to sync kits and all over the world, folks get to understand that, because most of us are audio listeners anyway, right?
That's right.
This is the way we can fashion ourselves. And so giving me this platform, giving me a chance to just pour out, stuff that I probably wouldn't have been able to say is really great, because I think that I may have affected 1 or 2 lives, or maybe someone would have done that. And so I think that is your superpower. That is the superpower that you're giving in this. And that would be my last thing. Just take a moment to listen.
Yeah. A moment to listen. It's important. I guess that's why we have 1 mouth and 2 ears, right? so that we can listen. Again, I want to thank you again for being in the studio. For those of you who are listening, you can catch us again on Amazon, Fire TV, on Android TV, Apple TV, Roku. I also encourage you to download the OurTV.network app. And I also encourage you to listen to us on TPRO. And while we're here sharing here on StreamYard, we're also on WSCX Bloomberg Radio. So folks are also listening to us throughout the world on the radio as well. And so I want to thank you again, my brother from another mother, for joining us on the Coaxum Report. I've heard it's something that we said here.
You're doing it big though, because I'm Apple TV. You got to get where you at.
I've heard something you said here is going to be able to bless others. I know it will, because you started out by talking about your barriers in a way that they were all stepping stones. They were not anything that held you back. And even when you probably said I haven't worked since June, you went straight into I have to do the service program and DOE. You talked about cannabis in a way that those that are looking to get into that industry are looking at you like, hey, you look like me, I can do this too, because we didn't always benefit from this, right? But more importantly, you leading us with a final moment to just reflect. to just think, to just listen to others, not listen to respond, but listen to understand. And I think that that is really, really important, especially at this time in life with everything that we're going through. And so I want to thank you for being a part of the Coaxum Report. I look forward to your next. Tag me in, coach. You know, the young people, I'm always there for that moment. So let me know what I can do to help you get to the next level. Have a super amazing day on purpose. And remember to listen in for the Coaxum Report. Take care. Thank you.
Welcome to our TV network, your ultimate destination for all things exciting and essential. From mouth-watering food to the latest in fashion, health, education, music, movies, and news, plus thrilling sports and breathtaking travel. Our TV network brings it all to you. Tune in today and experience the best of every world, all in one place, rtv.network.
Imagine, if you will, a single point of connection that puts at your fingertips all of the things that we do in our daily lives with ease of access and convenience. Whether in your personal life, for work, travel, and entertainment with family, friends, and in your work life. The new OneConnect app is all you need to make your life more manageable and efficient in maximizing the best use of your time. The OneConnect app is your new connection in a world of busy people with lots to do and not enough time to get things done. OneConnect app was created with you in mind and is all you need. Download OneConnect app now. Also visit us at www.oneconnectapp.com.
Welcome to